Alrighty, hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde, and welcome to a conversation about the platformization of mental health care. We are streaming on YouTube live from Concordia University's fourth space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands here in Jogé, Montreal. Just a quick note about fourth space, if you're new to us, we collaborate with our university community to activate the research projects and ongoing conversations across the university by co-creating daily activities, such as today's conversation. We're really thrilled to welcome Galia Shmaile, PhD candidate in marketing and Concordia Public Scholar, along with her invited guests in for this hybrid conversation today. A quick note about engagement, we will have time for questions and comments. So if you're joining us live in person in fourth space, please just raise a hand and one of us will get a handheld mic to you so that the folks on Zoom or on the live stream can hear you. And if you're on Zoom, well, we're so glad that you could join us in that space. The rules of engagement stay the same. Raise a virtual hand and we'll be able to call on you. Or of course, you're welcome to put any comments or questions in the chat and we'll be able to see them here. All right, without further ado, I'll pass it over to Galia now. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm Galia Shmaile, and I'm a fourth-year marketing PhD candidate at John Molson School for Business. My supervisor is Professor Zainab Arcel, and as a public scholar in the cohort of 2022-2023, I'd like to welcome everybody to my Spotlight event, a conversation about the platformization of mental health care. It's a discussion panel, so we have a lot of amazing experts here in mental health that we're going to talk to today. So so let's move on to the second slide. So in 2019, the WHO reported that there were 970 million people around the world that had a mental health disorder. And 1 year after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, anxiety and depressive disorders increased by 26% and 28% respectively and globally. So as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic was one of these stressors that was impacting our mental health, but other things were going on, such as the ongoing climate crisis, the bushfires in Australia and other places of the world, and the Black Lives Matter movement against police brutality. So all of this was contributing to our mental health. Now we can move on to the next slide. So the WHO finds that depression is one of the leading causes of disability, and 1 in every 8 people in the world lives with a mental health disorder. And more specifically to Canada, it's 1 in 5 people who live with a mental health disorder. So we can move on now to the next slide. Okay, so what happened is that I was inspired by what was going on in order to study, how we were addressing mental health in such a stressful time. And so with the restrictions that were becoming imposed by the pandemic to reduce the spread of COVID-19, many services were being digitized to maintain access to them. And one of these things was mental health services. So while it existed before the pandemic, it was increasing in ubiquity. We were seeing a lot more of platformization for mental health care. My research specifically looks into the features of platforms or applications, both those created specifically for mental health care or some that have been adopted by mental health care professionals to still communicate with their patients and their clients, such as Zoom or Skype or others that have been adapted for this kind of service. So I won't go too much into it, but I will. I generally am looking at mental health care services and the platformization of that and the technical features that go into that. This event is a discussion panel that brings together professionals who have experienced the mental health care industry, the academic portion of it, and student mental well-being. So we're going to be talking about the platformization of mental health care with these experts and how technology has impacted the delivery of mental health care services. Each of these panelists has experienced this shift from in-person to online from different angles. So the discussion is going to shed light on how these different parties have experienced this shift. So first, we're going to start with our first mental health expert, Michelle Villan. So Michelle Villan is the CEO and co-founder of a platform that offers holistic medicine online, and it's called WonderSource. She's also a Concordia University alumna, so that's really exciting to see someone from our university succeeding in this field. So her insight on the digitization of mental health care stems from her experiencing of developing this digital platform for healthcare delivery. So welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's such an honor to be here.
Of course. So can you tell me a little bit about your company, WonderSource?
Yeah, of course. So we're an online holistic care platform helping employees and individuals live healthier, more empowered lives at work and at home. And so basically, we're focused on the whole person, and we integrate the challenges of work-related stress, leadership development, mental health, and personal well-being, because we know they're all connected, and we feel it's really important to treat it as such. And I'll go into the services in a bit.
Sure. So when did you start the company? Tell us a little bit more about what inspired you.
So I started in 2019, and there were many things that inspired me to start it, but I'll just focus on the main ones. So firstly, I had several family members struggle with mental health, and I continued to see firsthand how complex it can be, how different everyone's experience with it really is, and how there is no one-size-fits-all approach to supporting ourselves. Then personally, I had my own experience with anxiety and insomnia a few years ago that really drove home the need to get to the root cause of health issues and take more of a holistic approach to health, but also highlighted how hard it is to do so. I was anxious because I wasn't sleeping. My doctor didn't know what was going on. And it was only when I discovered functional medicine, which aims to get to the root cause of health issues, and I was recommended some tests that uncovered that my cortisol levels were off, that I was able to make a variety of diet and lifestyle changes, added some supplements, and that resulted in me sleeping through the night and feeling much better. And also at this time, I started to just learn more about how high the rates of chronic illness are globally, and that many are lifestyle driven and related to things like stress and mental health. And what I realized from not only my own experience, but from research and speaking to many others, is that it was really difficult to get the support needed to proactively support the various facets of mental health and then thrive. And there's just such an urgent need for it. So really, I just got to a point where I felt like I knew too much to not do anything about it. Those were the main reasons.
Okay, that's amazing. And you were proactive and you created this, you founded this platform. And so can you tell us about the services offered on WonderSource and how they are offered?
Of course. So firstly, everything we offer is online. And just to say, we launched like right before COVID. So we were always an online business. It was essentially like meeting a need that I felt I had, like trying to connect with these experts. And it was just always such a hassle. So I wanted to meet them online. So firstly, we offer assessment and matching. We will listen to people's needs and then match them with the appropriate expert. We offer curation. So we choose the experts and classes to cover all facets of well-being, like emotional well-being, spiritual, physical. Then we have these classes. So we've had some recent classes on stress management. We'll have one on anxiety. We just had a career success one, relationships. Then we offer group coaching, leadership training, one-to-one coaching with career coaches, health coaches, hypnotherapists, functional medicine. We have therapists as well for our business offering. And then we have a resource section to help educate people around these really important topics. And so for the most part, these are offered both B2B and B2C. And the idea behind all of it is that I sort of touched on this earlier, but we're all unique and need different support at different points in our lives. So for some, for example, learning to set boundaries and challenge difficult thoughts might be life-changing in a particular time, as it was for me. For others, introducing supplements that help them reduce stress and sleep better will have a profound impact, and so on. So we're really trying to be the support that people can rely on and turn to when in need.
That's amazing. And I really like what you're saying about, each person has their own specific symptoms or specific things that are showcasing themselves, and you need to kind of address that specifically to the person.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's amazing. And okay, so I've I was wondering, because my research specifically is on how technology gives us either it enables us to do certain things with its technical features, or it sometimes restricts us. So how well are we bringing mental health care to people through technology, right? So I'm wondering, for WonderSource, what are the capacities that it enables people to do or to have in order to seek mental health care and other types of healthcare through WonderSource? So if you could kind of speak to that.
Yeah, of course. So firstly, as I explained, there's the matching options. You can go and speak to an expert at WonderSource and get matched with the appropriate service. Then you can actually go in and book a one-to-one session. So in my own experience in the past, when I was trying to book like a coach or something, it was always a very, it was a complicated process. Like you'd have to go to all these different sites. So we want to be that place where people can do it in one place and feel comfortable that we're sort of handling the customer service and the payments. And then the classes, again, you can just book it online, but really we're using technology to enable the interactions and allow more people to access our solutions. But people and connection are at the core of our offering right now. So for example, like learning in a community is often much more effective than in isolation. Being able to ask questions, discuss topics, and get hands-on assistance really enriches the learning and growth experience for our audience. So we've just focused on that aspect of it. So the technology is enabling that to happen for more people.
That's awesome. Okay, and so I'm wondering, in terms of the WonderSource platform itself. So I know that you guys have the website, and you can go through to find, the healthcare professional that you are seeking, given your symptoms or given what you're seeking help with.
Right.
So I'm wondering, are there any technical features on the website, or perhaps if you want to develop something more in the future, is there something that you would like to build on from what you have right now?
Yeah, so right now it's basically what I explained, like it's all sort of within the platform, but from a technical aspect, it's not that sophisticated. I worked at AI companies before, and for what I was trying to accomplish at this stage, I felt the sort of technical aspect was fine for what we're doing right now. Having said that, we are planning to add much more. So in the future, we'll be offering evidence-based self-led programs on things like anxiety, self-compassion, and other key topics, more sophisticated assessment tools so people will be able to go assess themselves, guided meditations, a more robust resource section, pre-recorded content library, a more sophisticated booking system, and then sessions will take place within the platform. So we want to build these features because our ultimate goal is to be really a one-stop shop for well-being and preventative care. And like I said before, people are different and need to be supported in different ways. So while there are a lot of great apps out there, many are focused on one niche area and can be really hard to find and keep up with, as was the case for me. I couldn't find many of them. And not only that, but in many cases, engagement is very low. So we spoke to one company that had purchased an anxiety app for the whole company, and they had accessed the analytics and then realized that just not one person in the whole company used the app. So at the same time, while we are focused on this sort of like person-led, one-to-one sessions or classes, and it can be really effective, that's not always the right option for people. And it's not always available because of cost or other factors. So we do want to offer these different solutions so people can tap into the support that feels right for them. And there will be more of like a technical aspect to those types of things.
Okay. That's great that you have like plans for improving and building what you have already, and all of these ideas are wonderful. And you see certain companies right now that are doing this, but I like that you guys are going for the full spectrum of offerings, so that people have to go to you and then you can offer all of these different services.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was one of the things. We were speaking to different companies, and they were like exhausted by speaking to vendors, because there's vendors who focus on therapists, there's vendors who focus on each niche area. So that's what we're trying to accomplish, this sort of well-being place that people can come to for a full rounded support.
Amazing. That's really amazing. I'm so excited that we get to talk to you, because you're that voice of the industry who's kind of making a change in that way. And creating this platform. Do you work, can you tell me a little bit about how you work with your application developers and the people who are behind the software that you're offering, in terms of, even just the website or what you're going to develop in the future?
How do I work with them? Well, I'm working with my second developers right now. Um, it's a combination. Some of it has been sort of, in the more recent days, it's me coming up with sort of things that, I need to fix and need to change and update. And that's very much like led by me. But in the future, we're already starting to sort of plan the next phase. So that's a combination of us working together on what the limitations are. That's one of the things I would say too, is I have had the experience working for these AI companies. My most of my career was in startups. So there's certain things that you'd want to do sometimes, but there are limitations from the actual technology. So it'll be like a collaborative effort of figuring out how we can best set the next phase up. And one of our developers, one of the members of the developer team, has a background in coaching and mental health as well. So he sort of always has that hat of how will this impact the experience for the user? So, which has been great for us.
That's amazing. You're like combining the two expertise, and this is the perfect person to have that expertise as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so I know you mentioned that you've worked with AI firms in the past. We're actually going to touch upon it later, so I won't kind of bring it up right now, but I'm excited that you've touched upon that because it's going to come back to us in a little bit. So for now, we're going to move on to our next panelist, Sandra Kraus, a clinical psychology doctoral student at Concordia University. So we're all, we're Concordia, we're giving our pride to Concordia today. And as an academic, Sandra is interested in research on OCD and anxiety disorders. Also, Sandra has obtained her master's in clinical psychology from Concordia, so she's an alumna as well. And she's, like I said, currently doing her PhD here. So Sandra is bringing in two angles to the discussion panel. The first being as a researcher and academic in psych and obviously mental health care. And the second as a mental health care professional, because she's offering sessions she has offered sessions both in person and has done so also online. So we're gonna start talking to Sandra now. So can you tell me a little bit about your background in being a mental health expert?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess from a research perspective, I've been doing research, broadly speaking, related to anxiety disorders. From since I graduated my undergrad, I worked for a few years doing research in the area, and then started at grad school at Concordia in 2018. And since then, I've been working with Professor Adam Radomski in the clinical psychology department, who does research, like you mentioned, on anxiety and OCD, kind of broadly speaking. So a lot of the research focuses on what drives the different disorders and what maintains them. And then we also do research on treating them and how to kind of most effectively help people who have these problems. And like you said, so the clinical psychology program is half academic research and half of it is the clinical work. So over the last, I guess it's about 4.5 years now, I've also had the opportunity to work clinically, working with patients and clients in different settings. So that's involved 2 hospital rotations at different hospitals, working with different patient populations, working in a departmental clinic with kind of more of a private practice population, and then on a research clinical trial in our lab right now for OCD. So a bit of a variation there. And then, like you said, starting from before the pandemic, offering services fully in person, and then through kind of the hecticness of the beginning of the pandemic, the transition period, and then now that things are a little bit more set up that way, it's kind of been as different snapshots at different points in time.
Okay. And so, like you said, we did move from in-person to online when the pandemic was starting. And even right now, some people still seek therapy online. And so I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that specific transition from in-person to online, and how smooth it was, what your patients how they expressed themselves about it, how you felt about it.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a scrambling period. I mean, the pandemic caught most people off guard, and it meant that a lot of things had to transition pretty quickly. And I think healthcare generally tends to be a little bit slower on the technology side of things. So, prior to the pandemic, there really wasn't much incorporation of any kind of technology into the services that I was providing. So it was a big shift, and it's actually, I think, kind of a testament to the fact that like when you need to adapt, that people kind of figure out a way to do so. But yeah, I think initially it was a little bit messier, I would say, like trying to figure out the best way to deliver the services. And part of it was just kind of like doing it quickly to be able to continue helping the clients and patients that we were seeing at the time. So it started, for me at least, we transitioned to phone therapy off the bat, which was kind of the quickest substitute, I guess. And then over time, I think Zoom has kind of become like the more default platform that people have been using for video sessions. And then now, as we've been kind of in the state for a little bit longer, there's been more kind of specialized platforms that have been developed that different, I guess, more so in the private clinics, but I think hospitals have been a little bit slower to pick up on the kind of more specialized platforms there. But yeah, as it's kind of gone on, there's been a bit more of an adjustment, and it's been going a little bit smoother, I would say.
That's awesome. Okay, so I guess, like you said, you're kind of right now, you started with the phone, but now you're kind of moving on, or you have moved on to Zoom. I'm wondering, just specifically, if you had any clients where you needed to, you were literally seeing them in person, and then it just moved on to the phone, and then obviously, I suppose, to Zoom. But how were they reacting to that, or what was the the immediate response?
Yeah, so I would say it's been pretty mixed because so the initial reaction, I think it was an adjustment for people. I think that prior to the pandemic, it was sort of a foreign concept to a lot of people to be doing a lot of these things virtually, like healthcare related services. So I think, yeah, it took some getting used to. And especially when it comes to therapy, like so much of it is nuanced and so much of it has to do with picking up on kind of subtle changes in expression or tone or body language. And a lot of that was kind of missing there. So I think there was both from my end as a clinician and also from what I heard from the clients that I was working with, it felt a little bit unnatural at first, I think, but then we've all gotten so used to communicating this way, I think, over the last couple of years that I think that's less and less the case for people. I will say that even over the course of the pandemic, with the different kind of flare-ups where restrictions have sort of lifted and then gotten more restrictive again, and things have had to kind of switch back and forth in terms of availability of in-person options, that it is really mixed. Like I think it's a lot of it comes down to personal preference. There's a lot of people who seem to really prefer the virtual options, and there's a lot of people who still seem to find that there's kind of a disconnect or discomfort with the virtual options. So I think kind of like Michelle was touching on, there's not really, it doesn't seem to be like a one size fits all approach to treating, and I think it's about kind of that flexibility and adaptation.
Mhm. Yeah. And so for you specifically as a therapist, as a mental health expert, do you when you're using these I suppose Zoom as your platform, do you have any features that you find to be helpful to your sessions as you're doing so?
Yeah, so I mean, there aren't as many bells and whistles on Zoom as there are on some of the other platforms, but even just like something as simple as the screen sharing option is, I like to use a lot of visual aids and handouts and things in therapy. And, if you're doing it in a traditional office, if you don't print the right material or if you don't, happen to have it on your desk with you right then and there, that you kind of like lose out on the opportunity to use it. Whereas if you have your computer in front of you, the screen sharing can be super helpful for that. I've also, yeah, just in terms of being able to share videos as well, like little clips of things has been helpful. And last year at the hospital, I was working at the Allen Memorial in Montreal, and they ran a group for OCD there. And so for the group, it was actually pretty nice because we were able to use the polling options too to be able to gauge where people were at or people's perspectives on things. So yeah, I would say those are the main ones. The other bit too is the recordings. I encourage a lot of the time my patients and clients that I see to record our sessions so that they can have it kind of saved for themselves. And then if they need to refer back to things or if they want to remind themselves of something, then they have like a concrete reminder of it. Whereas in person, you don't really have that option as much.
Right, for sure, because you know, they have access to those recordings later on to kind of consider what's been said, what they said and what you said as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what about the features that have not been so great for the therapy experience?
Um, I don't know if there's necessarily features that haven't been great. I think just like internet connectivity issues are always a problem. And I think especially when you're like in the middle of a session and working with kind of emotionally heavy content, that if it cuts out at the wrong time, that can be kind of difficult. And depending on the patient population too, like one of the big issues I know early on when they were first transitioning over is like suicidality. And if you have someone sitting in your office and they're in crisis mode, that it's a lot easier to kind of, you know, have them there and intervene and make sure that everything's okay. Whereas if it's, you know, over Zoom and someone cuts out of a call midway through, you don't necessarily know if that's because their internet crashed or because, you know, something else is going on. So I think there's a little bit more ambiguity there when it comes to that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would say aside from kind of just like generally what you miss in terms of like the social cues about doing it virtually, that there aren't necessarily any specific features that haven't been useful, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and so since you've started, and now we're like we've said, we are easing up on these restrictions, and people have gone back to in person. How have your clients reacted? Are some of them going back to in person? Are some of them still opting for online? How is that working out?
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty mixed bag. I think when I've spoken to colleagues of mine that we all sort of had different hunches and hypotheses about like what was going to happen. Some of them were very certain, you know, like once people go virtual, they're never going to want to come back into an office and deal with like traffic and parking and metro and commute and all that kind of stuff. And other people thought that, you know, like as soon as people have the chance to come back in person, they're not going to want to do the virtual thing anymore. But I really do think it comes down to personal preference. You know, a lot of people have busy schedules and can't necessarily carve out enough of their day to be able to, you know, get themselves physically to an appointment for their hour-long appointment and come back, like to be able to, you know, schedule in between your meetings and do it from your office, or, you know, if you have young kids at home, to be able to just kind of like put yourself in a separate room and just take the hour for the appointment rather than all the other stuff that gets tacked on when you have to show up in person. But then on the flip side of things, for a lot of people, they don't have a private space at home to be able to do these things from. So especially for individuals from like lower SES backgrounds, that oftentimes that's a problem, that there isn't really a place in their household to be able to, you know, zoom in from privately where their family members can't necessarily hear what's going on. And I had one patient in particular who said that they felt like they liked being able to go in physically to the clinic to be able to talk about all this heavy stuff, because it sort of separated it from the rest of their home life. Whereas when it was all at home and they were doing it all on their computer, that it kind of bled out a little bit more, and that they didn't like that so much. So yeah, I think it sort of depends from person to person. I've noticed too that older clients that I've worked with have been more inclined to come back in person. I think tend to be less comfortable and less sort of natural with the sort of communicating virtually aspect of it. I think younger clients, it's kind of second nature. They've grown up with screens and talking to people through screens, so it's less feels less unnatural that way. So yeah, I think it really comes down to personal preference.
Yeah. And do you find that depending on the, you know, the psychotherapy approach that a therapist takes, that it impacts the therapy online differently? Is it easier when you're doing a certain approach or you're doing a certain intervention than it is when you're doing something else?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know if necessarily the approach would impact it all that much. Like most of what I've done has been related to cognitive behavior therapy, and where I am now is a bit of a mix of other approaches as well. I don't think I've necessarily noticed a difference in terms of the approach. I think different patient populations can be more or less helpful. So for example, like when I'm working with individuals with OCD, a lot of it has to do with developing kind of exposure hierarchies or testing things out. And so to be able to get a window into their actual day-to-day life and see them, like in their kitchen or in their bedroom is actually quite helpful. Other populations where things tend to be more volatile and there's maybe more emotional dysregulation, it's nice to have them sitting in the room with you because you can pick up on cues a little bit easier that way. But yeah, I think both in person and virtually can be adapted to most approaches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I've interviewed a few therapists so far, and I've kind of tailored the interviews to ask about what approach they use and how that kind of has impacted, delivering on Zoom or whatever platforms they choose. And I feel like they had pointed out certain interventions that required, a presence in the clinic itself, where they had to set up kind of chairs to and again, I'm not an expert in, sorry, I'm touching the mic. I'm not an expert in psychotherapy, but I've heard of certain interventions that require a presence in the clinic. So they did vocalize that for sure.
Yeah, I think I could see that for sure. And I think too, less, I guess, about the approach, but just modality too, like group-based therapies, I found you miss out a little bit, I think, when it's on Zoom, just in terms of the natural sort of progression of a conversation. It's hard to, tell who's looking at who or making eye contact with who, and like when people should speak up or not speak up. So I think, one-on-one, I've noticed it being less stilted, I guess, whereas group therapies, I think you do lose out a little bit in that sense. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So now we're going to move on to our third expert. She's our student welfare expert, Jillian Ritchie. She's our wellness coordinator at Concordia University. She's had experience in mental health care roles at AMI Quebec Outreach. She was a coordinator, and she has had a lot of, she has a lot of insight on mental health care. And today she's speaking to us as a student well-being expert. And so I'm wondering, Jillian, can you tell me a little bit about your role as wellness coordinator at Concordia?
Sure. So I work as part of campus wellness, and I run the Zen Dens at Concordia. So we have 5 physical spaces on campus. They're really a space for students to relax and just catch a break in between classes. We have a team of Pure Wellness ambassadors who are students trained in providing active listening as well as resources on campus. And then we also provide a number of psychoeducational workshops, and we partner with a lot of different people on campus to really spread the word about wellness and offer spaces both online and in person for students.
Awesome. Jillian started here at Concordia in 2018, and she manages the Pure Wellness Ambassador team. So like you said, the Zen Dens and some of these Zen Dens have their events, and they have partnership both on and off campus. And I'm wondering, can you tell me a little bit more about the Zen Dens before the pandemic, just in person, and how they were running?
Sure. Well, we were a pretty new program. We only started in December 2018, and then we launched just a few months later. And so we were running about 6 months before the pandemic started. So we were really trying to get our feet, really understand what students needed, how we could meet them, and see what it was like to run a brand new program. And then we got the news that the pandemic hit and had to turn everything online really quickly with no experience. But luckily, we worked with a team of Pure Wellness ambassadors who, working with students, they gave us really wonderful feedback about how we could reach students and how our programs could be modified. So we had a pretty quick transition. Like everybody else, it was, we really didn't know what we were doing, so everything was new, but we managed to find a way, I think, and now have landed in a good hybrid model.
Okay, that's great. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about, which is how this transition happened and what kind of suggestions your Pure Wellness Ambassador team gave you to kind of smoothen the transition?
Well, one thing that was a little bit difficult how to provide is the support that they offer to students. So they offer one-on-one active listening. So we decided to do Zoom rooms for that so students could join them online. We had either drop-in sessions that students could come to. We had supportive study with me sessions. So ways to meet the students online. Of course, dealing with Zoom fatigue at that point was real for everybody. So as we're offering these supplementary programs and workshop and support, the reality is that for people to have just spent 7 hours on Zoom and then going online to find that support, that was really probably the biggest challenge. But what we did find was that our workshops, when we transitioned those online, we were able to reach a much wider audience because a lot of our students had gone back to their home provinces or home countries. And so we were able to centralize that. And then also, because of the nature of some of our workshops that we offer, I think students, you know, they had a little more anonymity. So if they were coming to a workshop about addressing anxiety, they didn't really have to out themselves to say, well, I have anxiety, even though, I mean, we all do. And we are all, this is part of what we're trying to share is that, you know, normalizing these things and talking about them. But we did find that the online version of the psychoeducation has been really beneficial. And we've actually continued to deliver all of our workshops online.
Okay, so I mean, and you did that very smoothly because, as you said, you were reaching people who were not present physically, people who had to leave because of the pandemic and they needed to be isolating with their parents and with their families. And so I was wondering what kind of events you were not able to kind of translate online, not because of anybody's not because of an incompetence issue as much as it was the fact that technology did not support that.
Therapy dogs, I would say. It was pretty hard to, I mean, we could definitely share videos and share pictures of cute dogs, but it's not quite the same as going and snuggling a nice real dog. So that was a little bit more difficult. I mean, we did find that our yoga and our dance classes, our meditation classes, those were all able to be transitioned online. However, as we've restarted some in-person programming, we did our first in-person dance class at the gym, and that was really, really fun to see people coming together and students doing things. I mean, we're talking about wellness, but through dance and through activities. So it's sort of indirectly addressing wellness while doing something really fun and creating that community. I think that was the one thing that we try to do through the Zendens with the Pure Wellness Ambassadors, with our amazing team of counselors. You know, creating those connections within the community is really important for us. So that was something else that was a little bit more challenging just because we couldn't be face to face.
Mm-hmm. And you've mentioned, you know, there are a lot of things about technology that have, you know, made it more conducive for students to attend these events, just like the privacy of, or the anonymity of not needing to express an anxiety or anything like that. So are there other features of the technology that you used? Well, actually, if we can clarify, it's Zoom that you guys are adapting your events to, right?
Yes.
Okay. And were there other features of Zoom that were making these events kind of more beneficial than in person?
I think to a certain extent, sometimes the breakout rooms were helpful, but I think it's not really a Zoom feature, but just being able to get feedback directly from students after our workshops, because the student feedback is really what determines all of our programming. And so that was something really valuable. We found that people are pretty good at giving feedback if it's right there and you ask them to do it right away. Another thing, I guess just the reach of how many people we could reach, that was also really beneficial. Yeah, I don't know if there was other specific features. Really.
Sure. But I mean, breakout rooms, you know, you're able to get feedback. These are all great things that help you kind of develop your events for the future, right?
Exactly. And one other thing we did use a lot was AHA slides, which we found was a really nice way to engage students and get their, kind of get their thoughts out and to share. It's nice when people can create a word cloud and kind of see the similar things that they're all experiencing. I think it can be really validating. And I think in a time where we've had our social skills really compromised in a way, that it's nice to be able to share and connect with people, but in a very kind of low barrier way. There's not really that much intimidation, so you can share things. And again, like I said, the validation of seeing that other people are going through similar things, I think that was really helpful.
And for our attendees who are not as familiar with the AHA slides, it's kind of like a poll. Like, is that what? Because I've attended some of the Zendens events and I've seen it. Could you kind of explain what that feature is?
Sure. It's just a participatory online thing. So someone asks a question, you put an answer in, and then it can either generate a word cloud or you can do little quizzes. There's a lot of different platforms that can kind of help with that.
For sure.
And then you can get the information, you can download it after, so you can keep the responses of what you're asking from your audience.
Mm-hmm. And students are able to see that it's not just them who are having these negative experiences, others like them are also having these experiences. So it's a kind of, people can see that they're not alone in this. So now that we're back in person, have any of these Zendens events stayed online?
Yes, our workshops, as I mentioned, they've all stayed online. We found that that's just worked out really well. Having them usually at noon, it's a good time to reach lots of people. So we've seen our engagement significantly go up. Also, the fact that we're partnering with some of our on-campus partners like Grad Pro Skills and Future Bound, we find it's really helpful to get the word out. Other things that we're keeping online, we have a yoga class that has been able to be hybrid. So it's being offered at the Loyola Chapel, but for those who can't make it at the chapel, then we have an online version as well. Or it's just streamed like we're here today. And some of our meditation courses are still online. So we're sort of picking and choosing. Mostly it's the psychoed that has stayed online, and then certain dance classes that will still be online, but the therapy dogs, we've gotten them back in person, which we really enjoy that. A couple other dance classes, so.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm definitely coming to the next therapy dogs session because I couldn't I think it was like a month ago or maybe a few weeks ago, but next time for sure.
Next Tuesday, they'll be at Loyola from 11 to 1 at the library.
Okay, that's great. So in general, I wanted to discuss if Zendens ever promote any guided meditation or any sort of applications with some exercises that help with mood. Has that ever been tapped into where you guys promoted that kind of thing to students?
We haven't, I guess we do have resources where we promote certain apps on our website. I work with an amazing team of counselors, and they've really kind of vetted all of the resources that we share on our website. So we do have a resource section where we would share things, but we also create our own content that either lives on our website or is on our social media, the @CU Student Experience Instagram. So I guess we've promoted meditation through that. We have counselors who offer a series of meditation classes. So there will be one, I believe it's starting next week, actually, a 4-week series. We're doing another meditation series that will be live in person with ROC, the Recovery and Wellness Community Center. So they'll be hosting in-person meditation sessions in our JMSB Zenden. And then we are also partnering with the Multi-Faith and Spirituality Center in the new year to host 2 in-person 4 weeks meditation series. So one downtown and one at Loyola.
That's great. And one of the things that I'm looking at in my research is how therapists have started offering, like we talked with Sandra, therapists offering their sessions online. And so I'm wondering if you've had the chance to talk with the counselors about how they felt about their move to, for instance, online sessions, the counselors at Concordia, and yeah.
I don't know if I can really speak to the counselors and what their experience is, but I know for our peer wellness ambassadors, we've transitioned. They're available to be seen in the Zendan spaces at certain times during the week, but they also have online active listening sessions that can be booked. So that was an experience that we had never done with students before, but it's a self-booking system, so anyone can go online on the Zendan website. You can look at the peer wellness ambassadors, and there's just kind of a basic booking system that people can self-select a time to speak with an ambassador. I think they're enjoying the experience for students. I think they like that opportunity of being able to support another student and do it in a one-on-one environment. I think they also like being in the Zendans when you get to see a person, because as Michelle and Sandra were saying earlier, I mean, there's a lot, those nuances that we miss when we're online, and a lot of the body language, and there's a lot of subtle things that you miss. But I think just being able to offer this online, and when we know counseling services is in really, really high demand, not everyone can get through, it can be really challenging. So to be able to offer another type of support in sort of a more stepped care system that, you know, there's many, many ways to address your mental health and your well-being. And so with the peer wellness ambassadors and the events and everything that we're trying to do, kind of trying to do it a holistic reach for students.
Yeah, for sure. And do you have any, events that you have done online and then wanted to adapt in a certain way because of a limitation or because of something that you felt would be even more beneficial, or even any events that are coming up in the future that build on this online platform or having people join online?
Again, we'll try to do some hybrid courses, whether it's with our dance classes or our yoga classes. It's been interesting to have in person, but also be able to reach the people online. Like I said, our workshops, they'll continue to be online. So we will, moving forward, we're absolutely adopting a hybrid model, because there is so much value that we found in being online, while also still needing to cater to the need of being in person and hosting things on campus, and trying to help recreate those connections for students. You know, we have a lot of third-year students who are here for their first year on campus. So we're really trying as much as possible to make those connections and give students an opportunity to explore wellness in as many ways as they can.
Yeah, and with them missing those first 2 years, kind of being behind a screen, it's so beneficial to be able to be in person and meet other people in such a positive, light with Zendans, Okay, so I asked Jillian a little bit about this, so I'm going to move the question to Sandra and Michelle. I just want to talk about how you've integrated any meditation or psychotherapy approved applications to your work. So have you recommended these applications to any of your clients, to your patients? How has that been part of your work with mental health care?
I guess, I don't know, do you want to?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think for me, it gets a little tricky with the apps, because there's so many mental health apps and a lot of them haven't been vetted appropriately. Like, there's a lot of great evidence-based apps out there, and there's also a lot of not as great not evidence-based apps, I think. And so I think it gets a little hard to navigate which ones are which. And then I think the other aspect of it comes down to like privacy related issues. So I know like the OPQ, I think one of the mandates, at least within Quebec, is that the servers be encrypted. And so it's hard to know, like, when you're recommending stuff that are kind of less regulated apps, like what level of privacy and security that you can kind of guarantee for patients in terms of their data. Just, I guess that's kind of the caveat. That aside, there are some really great ones. Like I've recommended Calm to a few people as a meditation app, because it's more of just like a passive, like you're not actually inputting any kind of sensitive mental health related data. There's also a group that developed an intervention for PTSD that has a series of apps that they've kind of adapted their evidence-based treatment to use. So like CPT Coach is it's called. So the therapy is cognitive processing therapy, and they've created this sequence of apps that involve, like some meditation stuff, but also like worksheets and infographics and kind of interactive components that sort of complement the therapy that's offered in person. So yeah, I think that there's some good evidence for some of the apps out there, and then there's a lot of ones that kind of muddy the landscape a little bit, which can make it hard to tease them apart.
Yeah. Michelle, you wanted to
Yeah, I mean, I would say I sort of have a similar feeling. I do use Calm. Calm is actually the main app and I love it. I use it for like guided meditations and the music to sleep at night. But mostly I would say, and I'm sure there's so many amazing ones, but my experience was like anytime I was looking for something, it was so hard to find one. I didn't know if it was, I didn't get necessarily a good vibe from it. I mean, it is part of the reason that I built WonderSource was because I genuinely couldn't find. Every time I was looking for something, a business coach, in the end, I came to functional medicine through like a very long, lots of research and everything. I couldn't find anything. It was like asking friends, and then a friend would recommend something. And so I'm sure there's many great ones out there, but I don't have ones to recommend. And it was part of why I wanted to start WonderSource. But I do think Calm is amazing. I have some friends who like Headspace as well. Again, I think it's very personal. Some people resonate with different apps. I didn't resonate with Headspace, but Calm really, I like it a lot. And I have also used a mental health, like a therapy one once. I was curious to try.
Right.
And in the end, like I didn't have a very good experience from it. And there wasn't that much that was going on in it. It was really just connecting us. But yeah, I didn't have the best experience with it, I would say.
And can you speak to like, obviously nothing personal, but specifically what about the application wasn't conducive to a good, mental health care experience?
Well, for starters, my therapist wanted to talk on the phone. And I mean, I could have taken the time to say I'd rather like we do face-to-face, but by that time I was already invested with her and I didn't want to go through the whole process to get rematched. So that was one thing. I just, again, to me, it wasn't really a technical thing. I've had therapy a few times and some were great and some were not. And really the main thing for me always comes down to it being a good fit or not. I felt in that particular case, like I didn't find that the therapist, well, partly maybe we were just on the phone and it's hard to get a sense. But I didn't feel like she understood me. And it was helpful to a point. So I saw her for like a couple months and then I realized I'd rather be seeing a coach right now. So.
Yeah.
And I think I'll just jump in like the research nerd part of me. Also like the literature on it. I think it's been interesting over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of just kind of natural experiments with the switch to online, and they found that video platform therapy is as effective as in-person therapy when it comes to like therapy outcomes, but that when you switch to over the phone that you see a bit of a reduction in the effectiveness of it. And when it's just kind of self-directed, like bibliotherapy, like kind of self-guided, just psychoed apps, that you see even further reduction. So I think, again, it's like a person by person thing. Some stuff works more for some people than others, but when you kind of zoom out on the whole, that you kind of like lose something, I think, when you're not getting as much interaction with the person.
Yeah, exactly. That was my feeling as well. Sometimes, there's a time and a place for a self-led app. Maybe you have something going on and you don't feel comfortable to talk about it with a therapist. You're not ready to face it or something, let's say, or you don't have the money to spend on a therapist. So it does play a purpose, but at the same time, I haven't necessarily had a good experience with it.
For sure. I mean, teletherapy has a long way to go, like we all know, because we're just inserting technology into a service that has been traditionally in person, and we're all making an effort to make it more adaptable, just like you are, Michelle, with WonderSource. So hopefully we can move to a better place for teletherapy and mental health care online. So Jillian, do you have any experience with these mental health care apps that offer certain guided meditation or anything like that? Have you recommended any to students, or from the resources that you say that Zendens has online, is there anything on there that has any of these apps in terms of, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Headspace and Calm are apps that are frequently promoted. Insight Timer is another one that I use personally. It's free, and I find that there's lots of diversity. But I think so many of these things, it really is a personal, who you connect with, what type of meditation you like. So I think for people, if they're interested in exploring them, to maybe download the free ones first, start and see before you start paying, if maybe you resonate with that.
And there's even, because we mentioned Calm, and I just remembered something because I was researching Calm and I was looking into it specifically. And it's really interesting, but they do even add a celebrity component to Calm, where there's like Shawn Mendes telling a story. And I thought that was really interesting from a marketing perspective, where they're kind of inserting this, a voice that or a personality that and it's trying to kind of guide you through a meditation. And I enjoy that they want to kind of insert the real world into this guided meditation. Does anybody have kind of like an insight over these inserted celebrities? I know, Michelle, you've used Calm, so have you had any of these experiences? Yeah.
I liked it. I can't remember, it was a while ago, but I think it was LeBron did like a series, and I thought it was great. There's a daily meditation that I always listen to, and then they've just added Jay Shetty. Do you know Jay Shetty? He's like an influencer in the wellness space, but he's quite a big influencer. He probably has 50 million followers or something like that. And he has his own sort of daily Jay. So there's that. But yeah, I think LeBron is the main one that I did, and I thought it was really well done.
Yeah. And I think he talks about his successes and his challenges, and it's really helpful to see somebody so successful go through the, things and motivate you when you're listening to such podcasts or guided meditations. Yeah. So like I said, we talked about AI like a tiny bit when we were talking with you, Michelle, and I'm wondering if anybody has any kind of ideas about what's going on the AI field of mental health care. There's been, certain applications that offer, a conversation, a simulated therapy conversation with AI. And I'm wondering how that's been perceived both by my discussion panelists and people online as well, if anybody has had any experience in the AI application field.
Well, just on the chatbot, I mean, I saw a news segment recently about Wobot.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Wobot?
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically with Wobot, the journalist was testing it out, and they were saying like, I'm anxious and I can't sleep at night. And then the robot replied saying that they were excited to get into their jammies at night. So to me, and they showed a couple other examples as well that were very ineffective. So I think like that's not good. That should not be. I don't know how, I don't know, maybe they've come a long way since then. I've never tried it. But I think it's a tricky one because people like to throw AI on things to make it like, more investable, let's say, or more interesting. But for example, like one of our things is that we speak to people and we manually match them with someone, because I think it's really hard to say like with an algorithm, this is the right person for you. I don't know that we're there yet, or that we'll ever be. So definitely I've heard of certain like a gaming app for like 8 to 12-year-olds helping them with OCD. And there's so many things that are happening that are great. But yeah, so far, I mean, from my perspective, I didn't feel like it was necessary in our platform.
I think too, just in terms of like the evidence out there, that I think like the most potent predictor of like successful therapeutic change is a therapeutic relationship, kind of like Michelle was touching on, the click and like the warmth that you feel with the person that you're talking to, and the actual interventions that they're providing also obviously help, but actually not as much as that like person to person contact. And I can't help but feel like that would be super hard to replicate from a technology standpoint. And again, it's not my area of expertise, but I think there's just that intangible component that oftentimes when people are going to therapy, it's to seek out that sense of connection as well as the support and the interventions that they get. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to see with like newer generations who are born into worlds where technology is like so second nature. But I think, yeah, you just lose out on the human component, which I think is such an important part of the therapeutic process.
It is. And there's so many studies on just like that empathy from another person, how like healing it can be.
Mm-hmm.
I think for now, like the benefits that we can see from these AI mental health care applications, such as like Wyza, Replica, Wobot, there's like a bunch that I've been looking at. I think the good thing about them is that it's something to reach out to when you're in that position. And what they do is that at least they kind of recommend options of how to address your symptoms. And I think that on its own is just the bare minimum until you're able to see a professional, or in the case where you're very, demotivated and not feeling well enough to go somewhere, this is just a good start, So there are some benefits, but it is, like you said, the professional, seeing that person and creating that collaborative relationship with a therapist and a person, even if it's, someone like a peer, like the wellness ambassadors, that's really important to be able to kind of have that human to human connection. So yes, it definitely has a long way to go, especially with these AI, it's not very sophisticated AI, it's conversational AI. And what that means is that like you kind of answer them with predefined answers. So it's not even really you saying something, it's something they've already given you to answer the AI, which is not really your response. So let's take a look at our chat to see if anybody has asked a question or lent their opinion, if possible. Is that okay?
Hey, Galia. I hope you can hear me. Hi, it was a great talk, in fact. So I just had a question, like when you're using these various mental health apps, do you think that it is tailor-made for each a patients or like the users according to their own symptoms?
Can you, I'm sorry, can you clarify the question, please?
Yeah, like when you're using all these like Calm or like Headspace, kind of different mental health apps, in fact. So is it tailor-made for each individual, like according to their symptoms?
Oh, I would say definitely not. And I think this is something that Michelle spoke to, which is, you want to cater your therapy or whatever mental health care service you're providing to that person specifically, to their symptoms. So no, from what I've seen, that is not what is going on, especially since the AI is still a bit primitive and it's just conversational AI. So it's just kind of feeding you whatever it's been fed, kind of like it's not really developed enough to give you a very specific service to you. It's a track that it goes to from given what it's been taught. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
And maybe just to expand, because I think talking about the Zen dens earlier too, that sort of, I guess if you think of it as like a stepped care model, that if you don't have the means or access to in-person or video therapy one-on-one with a therapist, then phone therapy I'm sure would be great. Or if you're in a remote area and that's not possible, then like a self-guided app is better than nothing potentially. And same, I guess, with the AI, that if you don't have access to any other means, that it could be helpful. But I guess there's also potential harm there to just if it's not sort of, I don't know, the algorithms aren't kind of calibrated accurately. I don't know the tech jargon for it, but like I know that there's issues around bias too, and like racial bias when it comes to algorithms and the programming of these things. So when you're working with people who are potentially in vulnerable states too, and not having a person sort of overseeing it or there as kind of a backup plan, that I think that there's, I guess, risks to kind of weigh out as well there too.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, so I mean, as we've said, you know, AI can have faults. It's not going to give you exactly what you need, but it can recommend certain things that could help tide you over until you are seen by a professional. So from what I've learned about, you know, the mental health care covered through, you know, governmental insurance, specifically in terms of Canada, we are covered, you know, but if that professional works for the government at a public institution, so no privatization unless you have private insurance. So if you're seeking mental health care at a private clinic, that is not covered by your government planned insurance, which is something to say, like, you know, a part of what I hope to create impact for is that these mental health care platforms, the ones that are, you know, vetted and made sure of, are ones that could be perhaps covered in public insurance, because we're not able to see a professional right away. You know, usually sometimes we wait for an appointment to arise. We're on the waiting list for 6 months to a year, and it's really dangerous when the person is going through a mental health care issue or a condition. So some of the symptoms may be alleviated with some of these applications. So yeah, and what I'm wondering is if anybody, you know, in our attendees has had any experience with technology in terms of mental health care, and if they found certain, you know, benefits or limitations to what they've seen through their experience. And if not, if they have any questions for our discussion panelists. Yes.
Sorry, here you go.
Has anybody experimented or tried combining biofeedback with these apps?
Could you please clarify the question?
Are you familiar with the term biofeedback?
Could you clarify that, please?
Biofeedback will take things such as your heart rate, your perspiration, your breathing, and display it to you via the machine. And the idea is that if you become aware of your heart rate, you can slow it down or speed it up. So I'm just thinking it might be interesting to have that as part of the app, so the app could keep tabs also on where you're at.
Right. And your question is if any of us has tried something like that? From what I've seen, from the applications that I've looked at, it's mostly mood monitoring and mood tracking. So I haven't really gone into the biofeedback, unless anybody here knows or has had experience in such applications or such technology.
I myself haven't used,
Go for it. Go ahead.
I myself haven't used it, but I know people that have used the Aura app where it tracks your sleeping. And then based on that, it can kind of tell you like whether you're going to have a good day or not. And I've heard people who use it really like it, but I have not tried it.
I think Apple Watch does a good thing about checking the biofeedback, I guess, because they actually check the heart rate or the stress level, I guess. And I heard recently there was a man, in fact, he was about to get a heart attack or something. He got to know, and then his wife was informed about something like that. So it kind of helps you. Like, I think Apple Watch has that system of giving biofeedback. I've heard about
Sorry, what was the name of the app?
it's Apple Watch. In fact.
Apple?
The Apple Watch, like your Apple Watch.
Okay, but which app on the Apple Watch?
No, it's a health app. In fact, there's a health app in it, so it actually checks everything for you, like your heart rate or like your stress levels and all
It's
that.
the heart image on
Yeah,
the
the
app.
heart image. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we had another comment or question over there. Okay, sorry.
Hello, Galia.
Hi, Joseph.
Very interesting talk. So my question, I guess, with this is that a lot of the transition to online therapy and these different apps occurred kind of like out of necessity. So I'm curious about, like, I know that I think Michelle, you or Sanjay, you talked about recording Zoom. Actually, it was Sanjay who talked about recording Zoom sessions. And obviously, there's a lot of privacy around these therapy sessions. So I'm curious, like, where the regulations are in terms of restricting certain apps and certain applications, because you mentioned it's so hard to know what's a legitimate app, and is the government or is any kind of policymakers trying to like create some protections there for consumers?
Yeah, so all psychologists in Quebec are governed by the Order of Psychologists, the OPQ. And the policy, like there wasn't really much policy around virtual therapy before the pandemic, and then they had to create it pretty quickly. And so I think it's been sort of adapting over the last couple of years. But one thing is that I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure Zoom is the only OPQ approved video therapy app right now to be at the hospitals. I think is the only licensed, or I think Teams as well now, but it's been kind of adapting over time. But I think the requirement is that it has to be on an encrypted server as the sort of first stage of privacy requirements. But I know that one of the tricky things that set in too was about regional sort of, I guess it was never an issue when someone was coming into your office because they were always physically there, but now about like who can see, like what license, where you have to be licensed in order to see a patient, and like can someone in Quebec treat someone virtually who's like physically in Ontario, and different provinces have kind of different regulations around that. So that's been kind of an ongoing, a bit of a question mark on a policy side. But yeah, the encryption is one requirement. I don't think that you can just kind of use any like commercial application that isn't approved. And also there's requirements around consent forms now with patients when they start therapy, that it's very clear that like this is the mode that it's being delivered in, and these are the efforts that we're going to protect privacy, and these are the limitations, given that we can't kind of 100% ensure that there's no way to prevent with total certainty that things could be, you know, hacked or whatever else. When it comes to recordings, I guess privacy first, people have to zoom in from a private location, so they can't be in a public space, as one safeguard against like people just seeing their screen or their privacy being kind of compromised in that way. And the recordings I only use for like one-on-one individual sessions, so it's up to them to decide if they would like to record the session. And we don't do any recordings for group therapy sessions for that reason. So I think it's kind of, there's not really a perfect system. They're trying to kind of develop more regulations around it. It's been a slow kind of headachy process because everything bureaucratically, I think, moves pretty slowly. But they're sort of like figuring it out as they go. And a lot of it comes down to just being transparent with patients about what the limitations are and kind of figuring them out so that you can communicate that to people before you just kind of engage with a particular application.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, there's been a lot of, like you said, ambiguity about any applications aside from the ones that have been approved. And that is one of the things that hopefully the government can address by regulating even the privatized applications. Yes.
I'm Arokia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a PhD student in the individualized program.
Yes.
You call it indie program. My question, you can consider it as a seeking information. I'm a student here, but my colleague who has come from Africa. Recently, he had an experience with his employer, very traumatic experience. I encouraged him to seek for legal means, but later I was told by a student from Africa, there is a culture of silence. So they don't talk to people, they don't seek counseling, but they get healed through culture of silence. So my question to you is, as a student, how can I help my colleague through the facilities available at the wellness? Like, he doesn't want to meet a counselor, he doesn't want to talk about to a legal person. How can I be of help to him?
I would suggest that he could speak to a peer wellness ambassador. There's students who are also under a code of confidentiality. So nothing that is shared with them is ever shared externally unless they've expressed that they're going to hurt themselves or someone else, which is the same code that anyone in the industry would be under. So if this person just wants to speak about something, then it's a student who is there. They won't share anything that's disclosed with them. Sometimes that can just kind of help open them up to the idea that it's okay to talk about things. And this can be a huge sort of clash when you're coming from a different culture and then you're coming into a place that's so open and let's talk about everything. And that can be really difficult because not everybody is ready to, to start speaking about their things. So it's important to meet people where they're at and never make them feel like they have to expose or speak about anything that they're not comfortable. But it's really about creating that culture to say, we're here to support you. We're not judging you. We will listen. Our peer wellness ambassadors, they're not there to give advice or give feedback. It really, really is about listening and validating. So that's maybe even as a friend, sometimes we can never force anybody to take particular steps or get the help that they may need, even if it's really obvious. But what we can do as a friend and as a colleague, as a supporter, is validate what people are going through and say, yeah, that's really tough. That sounds like a really difficult situation. If you need, I'm here to talk. If you need, there's this resource. And if you're not ready right now, then I'll check in later and maybe you'll be ready. So it's really kind of opening those doors, letting people know that whatever circumstances they're going through, it's tough, it's good to validate them, but to never push somebody into something that they're not ready for.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jillian. I think we have a question from our Zoom attendees. Danielle?
Hi, well, that's me. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I'll just like to introduce myself before I start my question. So I'm basically doing my PhD in Toulouse in south of France. And my area of interest is adoption of AI-enabled mental health applications. And I'm currently working on my first paper. I'm only in my year one. So for my first paper, I'm actually looking at using mechanistic explanations as a way of increasing perceived value and perceived benefits of this AI-enabled mental health apps as a way of increasing positive perceived value for patients with anxiety in order for them to increase their adoption intention of these applications. So that's pretty much what I'm working on for my first paper. So right now, well, it's more of a research question. So right now I'm at a stage where I need to kind of manipulate anxiety in a group of consumers in order to test my mechanistic explanation on this group of people to see how the different levels or the different types of explanation will work best on people with anxiety in order for them to adopt the mental health applications. So this is the part where I'm actually, where I've been talking to a few people about to ask for feedback, because I have no idea how to manipulate anxiety in a way that's ethical in order to test out, the different levels of explanation for them. So I'm just throwing this question out there to see what you guys think about it and whether you would have any insight for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is like my bread and butter. My whole master's and PhD is just making people uncomfortable and seeing what what happens as a result. I would recommend our lab website, we do a lot of experimental research. So it's not AI, but it's all on anxiety disorders, and most of it is experimental. So it's like inducing some kind of temporary state of anxiety in participants to then see outcome variables. So our lab website is Radomsky Lab, RADOMSKY lab.com. And you can see all kinds of different, different projects that other grad students have done in the lab too, with different induction tasks. An easy way is to get people to do some kind of public speaking task and tell them that they're going to be evaluated. Tends to be like relatively innocuous, like doesn't last long, but is enough to kind of bring it on temporarily. Any kind of like evaluation task tends to heighten anxiety, or there's different kinds of like false feedback tasks that we do as well. So get people to do some kind of a task of some kind, doesn't really matter what the task is, and then give half of them, regardless of how they perform, false feedback about that they did well or they did poorly. And then it's important to like very thoroughly debrief people afterwards. That's a big part of it, to make sure that it's ethical and that people are okay. But anxiety isn't dangerous in bouts. It's uncomfortable for people while they're doing the studies, but as long as people are kind of adequately debriefed afterwards, and there's potential resources provided if people need it. That's kind of been our lab's approach to it, but there's a lot of resources on the website there and different papers that we've published with using different tasks.
Thank you very much. Your information has been very helpful.
Thank you, Danielle, for your question. Do we have any other questions from attendees?
Hi, Galia. Thank you so much for organizing the discussion today. It's been great.
Thank you.
So I'm also a marketing candidate in marketing, and I'm also doing a project related to mental health, specifically about how people prefer algorithm or against algorithm. So it's kind of like algorithm aversion versus appreciation. And we are looking at mental health field right now, and we are thinking if there's any under certain conditions, people may prefer to talk to an AI therapist. For example, one of the previous attendee mentioned that his friend from Africa have difficulty to talk to a person, a therapist. I wonder in any occasion that people may prefer to talk to an AI therapist first, for example, and then officially talk to a person. That's my question. Thank you.
Sure. Does anyone have any insight on the question? Yes? Oh, the mic. Thank you.
Research has shown that people are much more willing to disclose personal information when they think they're talking to a machine.
Yeah. That sounds really justifiable, because you're talking to a non-human, right? A non-human agent. And so I'm sure that it is much easier to talk to a machine about your troubles before approaching a human who might pass judgment. So that's probably why I haven't had the ability to research that specifically yet, but I will be talking to people in the future as a part of my data collection to kind of discuss how they feel about speaking with AI about their negative experiences as a part of their therapy. So thank you for your question. Does anyone else have any questions from our audience online or in person? Okay. We can hold off a little bit. But I just wanted to kind of open the floor up to our discussion panelists to just get any kind of last words about how we foresee technology kind of either bettering or perhaps hindering mental health care in the future, if anybody would like to kind of voice their opinion on that. Yes.
Just so people in Zoom can hear you. So with all the health cutbacks, I can see a bright future for this stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
I agree. I think that moving forward, we've learned so much from the pandemic, not necessarily willingly, but I think it has really opened up a lot of doors. I think we're going to be able to reach people in a lot of different ways. And I think really important about reaching people in mental health is meeting them where they're at on their journey. So I think technology does give us another opportunity to reach people in a different capacity. So I see it as only being positive.
Me too. I think once we kind of tweak whatever it is that we need to tweak, given the technology, we're going to be able to reach more people with technology for mental health care. Yes, I'm sorry. I think I interrupted someone.
I was just going to say, I think, yeah, the benefit is really around like the personalization of the medicine. I think it gives a lot more flexibility to offer different types of options to people. And yeah, I think when it's done well and rigorously and kind of like in consultation with, experts who are doing this kind of on the ground, boots on the ground, and sort of tested and proven, that I think kind of like limiting the mess of apps and things that are out there and kind of focusing in on quality over quantity, that it really is a powerful tool to be able to provide people with more options for different kinds of.
I mean, it's going to take a lot more research to kind of make sure that technology is the way to go and to solidify that it is the way to go. And my hope is that with my research, better understanding how technology is either enabling or restricting certain assets that we already know about mental health care, how we can adapt it to become a better medium to seek it. And hopefully with, in terms of my research impact, I would like to, lend my findings to application developers and therapists and anybody involved in the mental health care industry to be able to better understand how technology can create that therapy client relationship that we talked about, and how these interactions can still be created and can still happen via technology in the way that they happen in person. I also would hope to be able to impact influence the government and policymakers to regulate the privacy that happens, to make more privacy happen in these applications and through not just Zoom, but other technologies that are involved in mental health care. And also, like we said, to also include it in public healthcare in the future, so that in the meantime, while you wait for your referral to kick in, those 6 months to a year, you're able to kind of obtain some help for your mental health through these private companies that are offering applications and that are offering this help to your symptoms. So yes.
What's the extraterritoriality situation for using these apps as regards privacy laws?
Well, like Sandra said, that privacy is regulated when you are a part of the psychology union, the union itself, the order. I'm not sure because it's in French.
No, but my question.
Yeah. So it's guaranteed when we're using certain softwares like Zoom, but it is not when it comes to other applications. So right now, privacy is not regulated across all of the platforms that you can use to actually seek mental health care. So that's what it is right now in terms of privacy.
No, my question was on extraterritoriality of the laws.
Okay, can you clarify your question, please?
Well, do you understand the term extraterritoriality in legal terms?
No, please clarify.
Okay, I'll explain. So extraterritoriality means that Canada cannot pass laws that affect people outside of Canada.
Mhm.
So my question would be, let's say the app was developed, but it was only available in another country. But you know how people can spoof and get stuff on the Apple Store in Japan, even if they live in Canada. In that case, would Canadian laws apply?
I would have to say that I would need to look into that, but I'm not sure as of right now.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Sure.
I just want to thank all of my discussion panelists for contributing and for being here. Jillian, Michelle, and Sandra, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to the attendees, both in person and online. So I think we're going to shift to Anna right now.
Sure. Yeah. A round of applause, everyone. Thank you so much, Galia. It was such a pleasure to learn more about your research in this way through bringing all of these experts together. Thank you, Jillian, Sandra, Michelle, for joining us, and all of our audience online who I see clapping right now, and in person here in the space. Thanks so much for making the time to come in and talk about this important subject matter. We're so glad that you could join us. All right, folks, a quick reminder that we did stream this to YouTube. So if you'd like to revisit this conversation or share it with your friends, it's available there now. Just you can Google Concordia University's Fourth Space and find us on our YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody. Until next time, take good care. Bye.